Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I am your host, Alan Moore, and I want to genuinely thank you for joining me today. I know you are busy, and yet you took the time to hit the download button and listen in, and it's such an honor every time someone does that. So thank you for joining me today. Today's episode features Katie Brewer, who is a founding member of the XY Planning Network and founder of Your Richest Life, a financial planning firm based in Dallas, Texas, and she has clients all over the country. Now, Katie's career may sound familiar to many of you, as her resume makes it look like she was a little lost in her career for quite a while. And I think many of us, myself included, can relate to that. But she found her calling finally in the desire to ultimately start her own financial planning firm and has been absolutely killing it as she builds a business that's supporting her great life. We spent a lot of time going through the various stepping stones that she took in her career that ultimately led her to start her own firm, because I really wanted to be sure that you got to hear just the various steps. She really bounced all over the place in, I think, a good way, but I think it'll resonate with a lot of folks out there that are listening in that, are taking a little bit different of a path or not quite sure what the next step is. After we go through kind of her career, we dig into how she's getting clients, which is in some unique ways, including speaking to consumer-facing groups. So if you're a speaker and interested in using your speaking in order to drive leads and prospective clients to your firm, you definitely want to hang out until the end of the episode to hear that part of the interview. And as always, you can check out the show notes and additional resources at xyplanningnetwork.com/19. And also remember to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP, which is where you can interact with our guests, our vendors, many technical experts, Michael Kitsis and myself, as well as many of our founding members and previous speakers. Now, this month's episodes are brought to you by TD Ameritrade Institutional, which provides comprehensive brokerage and custody services to more than 4,000 fee-based, independent registered investment advisors. You can learn more about what TD Ameritrade is working on in episode 23 at xyplanningnetwork.com/23. Without further ado, here's my interview with Katie Brewer of Your Richest Life. Hey, Katie, welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio.
Hi, Alan. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being on. I am really excited to talk because you are one of the XY Planning Network founding members. So you have been around for, goodness, we've known each other for almost 2 years now, whenever we kind of go all the way back, but you've actually been in XY Planning Network for about 18 months. So thank you again for taking the time to be on today.
I know. I get like a couple gold stars for that, right?
At least a couple. We need to do like founding member t-shirts just so everyone recognizes.
Exactly. We need another t-shirt because as Michael states, the t-shirts are the way to market for everything.
It is amazing. For anyone that has not seen the XYPN t-shirts, you are probably not showing up to conferences. Michael and I have joked that we're going to have to write a book about how a t-shirt spawned a movement, because all of our folks are running around in their XYPN t-shirts hanging out at conferences. So,
and then they're like going like really cool places. Like Tyler Landis just went to Amsterdam and took a bunch of pictures in his XY Planning Network t-shirt.
It is very true. Those are on the Twitter feed. He was tagging our handle at XY Planning, and it was awesome. I'm trying to remember, someone else was at Disney the week after the conference and was also running around the XYPN t-shirt and our XYPN conference t-shirt, which was awesome.
Right.
So I'm just kind of curious about your backstory. So how did you get into financial planning? I mean, how did you originally discover this profession?
Well, I was not one of those people that actually went to school for financial planning, which is funny. In the XY Planning Network, I feel like there are a lot more people that didn't go to school for financial planning than I've normally met. But I went to school for a biology degree. So I didn't even pick a really easy degree. I mean, if I was going to pick an easy degree, I could have gone with like underwater basket weaving or at Texas A&M.
Careful, there may be some underwater basket weaving degree seekers listening in.
There might be, or at Texas A&M, like we had all kinds of ag type of things. Like I could have been, chicken, poultry sciences, or just kidding. That's not an easy degree either. But I decided to go.
I'm about to say, this is where I drop in that my dad was an ag science major. So.
Yeah, you're like, hold on, you are offending me right there. I thought I was going to be pre-med. And honestly, I didn't know anything about medicine or about being a doctor. I didn't know anybody that was a doctor. But, the 18-year-old myself was like, they're well respected and they make good money. So I want to do that. That's a horrible way to choose a career. So whenever I started going through all of the classes, anybody that's a biology major, I'm giving a shout out right now. I took organic chemistry. I hated
gross.
it. And then I took biochemistry, and I actually hated that even more. And I was like, I think this is my sign right here that I don't want to go to medical school, because it's somewhere where essentially you memorize a whole lot of stuff and then you go put it into practice. I tend to be somebody who really wants to dive in and analyze stuff, help people through problems. So, I kind of decided to go a different route, and I went into financial planning.
So how did you discover that this was even a career? I mean, were you still in school, or was it a conversation that happened?
Right. So my senior year, I was getting ready to graduate, and, everything was unknown. I had decided I didn't want to go to med school, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to go into something else in health sciences. But I knew I was going to graduate, and then I was going to have to be responsible. I mean, the R word, like,
It is unfortunate.
It's so unfortunate. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm one of those people that if I have no idea what I'm doing, I'm like, well, I'm going to go learn it. Darn it. So I signed up for a course that was an elective taught by Marilyn Hood, which is funny. I connected to her 10 years later, and I was like, by the way, you're my inspiration for getting into this field. And she's like, I am? And we've kept in touch since then. She thinks what I'm doing is so exciting. But she taught a course that was just personal finance elective. It was open for all majors. And it was something where we kind of learned the basics of budgeting and cash flow. It would probably be very similar to the first course of the CFP, where it's just like all of the basics that you need to know.
Basically that fundamentals intro course.
It was probably very similar to like the fundamental intro course, but to me, it was just like amazing. I was like, I didn't know any of this, but it is so exciting. And, I know there are other people that probably have no earthly idea how any of this works. I was like, I have no idea how I'm going to do this, but somehow I'm going to go into this career someday. So that's kind of when I decided, when I was 22 years old and about to graduate with my unrelated biology degree.
Amazing that someone with a degree in biology who made it through OChem and biochem and all of that still has absolutely no idea how to budget. Like, it's just amazing to me still that the school system doesn't actually teach those classes in all of the degree programs.
Yeah. And so in my practice, I actually work with quite a few women attorneys, women doctors, women in health, part of a couple usually, but usually it's the woman that kind of reaches out and connects. And they always have this guilt because they're like, I'm a really smart person. Like, I am an expert in my field. Why do I feel so stupid when it comes to money? And so part of my first conversation with them is usually, like, you're an expert in what you're an expert in. But the good news is that you realize that you're not an expert in this, and that's why we're working together. I'm like, you could be a lot worse off because you could never realize that, completely botch it up, and then attempt to go get somebody to fix it. I'm like, much better off being proactive.
Yeah, doctors, PhDs, like your really highly educated clients are sometimes notorious for that, of, feeling like because they're experts in one area, they should be experts in all areas. And I always used to tell folks, and I remember specifically, I had a doctor kind of tell me the same thing on, I don't understand why I don't know this. And I was like, I know. I woke up the other day and I'm like, I have a master's degree. Why can't I perform an appendectomy? Like, I'm a smart guy. I should be able to do that. And of course that, we get a good laugh out of it. Doctor laughs, and that kind of brings it back to like, it's okay to be an expert in your area without being an expert in all areas. Now, you need a base understanding of what's going on. So it's awesome that they actually had that course and it was open. So what was the first job out of college then, kind of once you realized that you wanted to do this for a career?
Well, I wasn't quite in the place to jump in and do it right out of college. I kind of figured that I needed to get my feet wet. I needed to have an income, and I didn't quite know where I wanted to live yet. So I'm one of those people that met the person that I married back when I was like 21 years old, which always like blows people's minds.
Love it.
But my now husband, back then boyfriend, was still in school finishing his last year. So I moved back home to Austin, Texas. And, we kind of did the long distance thing for a year. And so I did auditing at a hospital for 2 years. Also really not related to biology or really to financial planning, but it was a decent job. It paid pretty well. And I spent the time that I was there kind of researching options of how to get into the financial services industry.
So you did that for 2 years, and then kind of what happened from there?
So we moved up to the Dallas area, which is where we are now. And that was back about 12 years ago. So whenever I got to Dallas, the job that I had at that point with the hospital auditing transferred me, which was good. So we still had that job. I started kind of looking into where I could put my foot into the door. And that was really interesting because I did not have a finance degree. I didn't have a financial planning degree. At that point, I didn't have any CFP. I was essentially like, I don't know where I'm going to go, but anybody that's going to take me at this point, I will go do it just to try it out. So I started off with a financial services firm that I'm not going to name, but they're known for having their offices in strip malls, sometimes next to like Subway sandwiches. And they send their reps out into neighborhoods to knock on people's doors and essentially ask them if they are interested in working together.
What a great introduction to the personal finance industry, is working in a strip mall and knocking on doors.
Oh my gosh, can I tell you, my mom was so mad. She was like, I just paid for your 4-year degree and all you're doing is wandering around neighborhoods asking people if they'll do business with you. And I'm like, all right, Mom, I'm looking at the big picture. I know this is what I want to do. This is just the starting point. I just thought it was funny because the whole time she's like, I knew you should have gone into engineering. And I'm like, okay, just, it'll be all right, Mom. It'll work out.
That's such a mom thing. It's like, I knew you should have gotten a real job and a real degree.
Exactly.
So how long did you do that for? I mean, I can imagine that after about a week of that, I would want to be looking for something else.
Yeah, it was not easy at all. And I'm not a natural salesperson at all. I like meeting new people. So that part of it was good because I did like going out and just having conversations with people. But at the end of the day, I had to meet numbers every single month. And if I didn't meet those numbers, I would have somebody kind of on my butt about it. And that part of it like really stressed me out because even at that point, I was like, I'm not going to do something for somebody if I don't think it's in their best interest. I was not held to a fiduciary standard there, but I think I wanted to be a fiduciary before I even knew what a fiduciary was. So
Sure.
that might have created a little bit of conflict in that if I wasn't making my numbers and I'm saying I'm not going to do these things that you're telling me I should do, essentially I lasted probably like a year and 9 months or something. And then, I was like, I need to find somewhere where I could actually offer a financial plan as part of the process instead of giving away all of this information and all of this knowledge and just hoping that somebody will purchase something on the back end of that.
Makes sense. So what was the next job then?
So I went and worked with a firm they're kind of loosely affiliated with an insurance company. However, they do offer financial planning and they focus on financial planning. They had an in-house financial planning group. The only downside of that was that they actually focus on high net worth business owners. At this point, I think I was 26 years old. And then I always tend to look maybe 5 to 10 years younger than I am anyways. I have curly hair and a big, so everybody's like, did you just graduate from college? And I'm like, no, I'm in my mid-30s at this point, people.
Mid-30s now, not when you got the job with this firm.
Back then I was in my mid-20s. And so
you look 17.
Exactly. So as somebody who looks like they're 17, trying to go call on 55 to 70-year-old business owners that I just have their number because they're listed somewhere. Also quite challenging. But my hope and kind of what kept me going was like, okay, well, when I land one of these people, at least I'm going to be able to go through a process of a financial plan and not just, be like, hey.
So you were doing business development at this firm. I mean, you hit the ground out getting clients immediately?
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, now when I talk to people and they're like, oh yeah, well, so I graduated and then I went to go work for somebody else under their mentorship. And I'm like, man, I wish that had been around. I learned how to get that because that would have been probably a lot better and a lot easier for me than the route that I kind of took into the industry.
Yeah, you kind of got thrown to the wolves, but I mean, you came out the other side. So obviously it was a good learning experience.
Well, I listened to the very first episode that you did with Michael Kitz's, and I know Jude Boudreau also kind of took a similar path, and that we all kind of started at like a sales organization that sold a financial product that maybe had financial planning as part of a process of selling the product. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I look back and it would have been nice if it had been a little bit easier. But at the same time, I feel like I kind of earned my stripes in being in this industry.
Yeah, I would say so.
Because I had to go knock on people's freaking doors and be like, hi, I'm Katie. You don't know me. I just wanted to introduce myself to you and tell you that I have a financial services firm.
So real quick, you mentioned Jude Boudreau. So just for listeners that don't know, Jude owns Upperline Financial down in New Orleans, and we will definitely have him on the show, I hope by the end of the year. So he just spoke at our conference, and he just had a phenomenal presentation. So don't worry about trying to search for that last name because it has an X in it, if that tells you anything. It's a little funny spelling. So we'll don't tell him I said that. We can put a link to Upperline in the show notes. So have you gotten your CFP at this point in your career?
At that point, I started taking the courses for it. So somebody at that firm said, well, have you started with your CFP? And I said, no, because you have to have 3 years of experience to use it anyways. And he was like, well, you're about at the point where you could time it to where you could finish your CFP classes and have the 3 years of experience. And I was like, you know what? You're right. I'm going to go sign up. So I went through a CFP course at SMU in Dallas. Funny story. I started off with the whole like mailing order, like you mail off and you get a book and then you take an exam. And after I got the book and then carried it around with me probably for a month and then waited until the week before the exam and attempted to read the entire book.
Oh, nice.
I think I still got a B, but I was like, this is not going to work. I need a more structured classroom environment. So I signed up for the SMU CFP course. And I was really glad that I did because I met a lot of other people that were kind of going through the same thing. And I still keep up with them. I mean, it's been a long time since I had my CFP course. I keep up with people that were in my CFP exam coursework.
That's awesome. So you go through that process, get your CFP. Did you stay at that firm for a long time or did you kind of shift firms around?
I probably lasted there for a year. And then I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do at this point. Like, I'm obviously not that great at business development. I'm not sure how I'm going to get into something else. I had a very, very short stint with an insurance company. I believe it was like 4 months because truth be told, I was sold by their recruiter. They were like, yeah, we totally do financial planning and you would be so awesome. And the reason why it hasn't really taken off is because you haven't had, the level of sales manager that we have and stuff like that. So sorry to all of the insurance recruiters that are listening to this, but I was totally sold into moving over there.
Oh, well, that's their job. They're very good at selling people on coming into the company. There's a reason they have the tallest buildings in most cities.
Yep, they were. So I went over there, and after like the first month, I was like, this is not at all, like this is a step down from where I was at before. There was, some people did financial planning. It wasn't really required, but just the culture there, they tended to kind of train people with stories of selling products that maybe didn't actually fit into like what those products actually do. I'm going to leave it really vague, but long story short, at some point I was on a sales call with somebody and they started proposing an insurance policy as a super Roth. And this person probably could have qualified for a normal, boring old Roth. I guess that's what we're going to call it now. But they wanted to sell them
the super Roth.
A super Roth, which was essentially an overfunded insurance policy. And I was like, I'm out of here. I'm checking out. This is
wow. That's a new one. That's awesome.
Yeah, I know. You've got like the regular, boring, old IRS approved Roth, and then you've got like the super Roth.
The super Roth. That's a good sales. We have XYPN membership and we have super membership. It's 3 times the price with half the benefits.
Right. Yeah, maybe you should start selling the super membership, Alex.
But it's called super, so it must be awesome.
Exactly.
So it sounds like this entire time you were just searching for the ability to do comprehensive financial planning as a fiduciary, which seems so simple when you just lay it out, and yet so freaking hard to find sometimes in terms of, for young people looking for a job.
Yeah. And I mean, I always tell people, they'll kind of call me up, especially career changers, and I'll tell them like, I don't want to gloss this over, but sometimes just getting into this industry, just getting your foot in the door somewhere, even if you're not doing something that you really, really wanted to do, sometimes that's just what you have to do. Because as soon as you have, if you're licensed, if you have your licenses, or if you're doing planning work, if you, finish your CFP courses, or even better, finish your CFP courses and pass the exam, it's a lot easier for you to sell yourself, as a great potential employee or whatever. But just kind of getting into the industry can sometimes be a little bit bumpy.
Yeah, for all of our listeners that are in your first or second job and where Katie was at the start of her career, I will tell you all financial planning is not like what you're experiencing. If you're working for a company that your parents knew the name of the company before you got there, That was always my judge. If my parents had heard of the company, all financial planning is not that way. And I hope that by having Katie on and some other guests, you'll learn what real financial planning looks like. But many of us search for it for a long time. I was very fortunate in my career that I didn't have searched too hard, but many folks have searched for decades until they really find kind of that sweet spot to do the type of planning that they want to do.
Yeah, I actually was interviewed by the lady who writes So You Want to Be a Financial Planner. It's Nancy, I think Jones. Is that her last name?
Nancy Jones, yep.
Okay. And it was funny because whenever she wanted to set up the interview, I was like, I have bopped around all over the place trying to figure out where I could do what I want to do. And I was like, are you sure that's the story that you want to tell? And she's like, yep, absolutely. So I'm actually in a chapter of So You Want to Be a Financial Planner, kind of telling my story about how I wandered around a little bit. Okay, not a little bit. It was a lot. Just trying to figure out like where my ideals of being able to help people with their finances actually fit in with the business model.
So where did you finally land that you were able to kind of find that?
So after my 4-month stint at the insurance company, I did go work for a comprehensive wealth management firm. I will say, even to this day, I would totally recommend them to like my grandfather. You know, it would have to be my grandfather because he's the only one that could fit their minimums. But they're a great firm. They totally abide by and believe in the financial planning process. You know, they take care of their clients. They do what's best for their clients. They charge a lot just because, you know, they can essentially at this point. They've been around for a long, long time. But that's where I really got to kind of dive in and see what real financial planning was about. Like, actually, you know, somebody comes to you and says, like, I have this concern, and being able to say, well, here's how it all fits together in the big picture. You know, here's why just, you know, being worried about retirement planning isn't necessarily going to get you anywhere, because you might be worried about it, but you might not be able to do anything about it because of your cash flow. So we need to go figure that piece out before we can fit it back into your retirement planning piece. So that was an awesome, great experience.
So it sounds like this is the first job that didn't involve business development for you, and you could actually just be a planner and work with the clients that the firm had.
Yes, it was. Yep.
And so how long were you at that firm?
I believe it was about 2 years. I'm going to just round everything up to 2 years.
Hey, that's totally fine. Whenever we add it all up, we'll be like, oh, Katie's 64 years old. That's great. We can timeline it out. So what caused you to leave that firm? A well-respected firm. You obviously have great things to say about it, but something caused you to make the decision that it wasn't going to be the right long-term fit for you.
Yep. So I don't know that you're going to like this answer, Ellen, but essentially I said, I know enough now to be able to do this on my own. I'm going to go try this on my own.
Fair enough.
So I had a CPA that was a friend of mine who, you know, I had talked to quite a bit about kind of pairing up. He had a lot of clients that he was already working with that were business owners. He really liked me. He felt like I had a lot to kind of add as far as value to his clients. So I went and associated with some other planners kind of working under their firm structure. I wasn't necessarily reporting to them. I was kind of like an affiliated member of their firm. So the good part of that was it really like reduced my overhead cost. Essentially, I had to pay for like my E&O and my licensing and maybe like a few other things, like if I did marketing or, you know, seminars or something like that. But I also got on their payout with their independent broker dealer, which was a big upside, because at that point, you can't walk into an independent broker dealer and be like, hey, I have a lot of knowledge and I have a CFP and I have $0 in assets under management. And they'll be like, I don't even know where you're calling me right now.
Right.
So looking back, I think I had the entrepreneurial spirit. I don't think I quite yet had a grasp around like how hard it is to just completely do that from scratch. So, you know, I gave it a really good try. The firm that I worked with at that time and the CPA that I was working with actually still work together. So I'm not going to say that was a fail at all, because, you know, I kind of made a good connection that has stuck for quite a while. But at that point I was like, you know, I'm not making any money. Oh my gosh. And I don't think I had quite prepared myself for like how long sometimes it takes for stuff to come back around. Like you might talk to somebody your first month out, and they might be all excited and really interested. And then just something comes up in their life. Like all of a sudden they found out they were pregnant. Or with women, sometimes, you know, like they've been trying for a baby and they decided that they were going to go through IVF. And so like they kind of want to take their focus off of their long-term planning and focus more on, you know, those types of things. So there are just things that happen that are out of your control as a planner. that, doesn't mean that those people aren't going to do business with you someday. It just means they're not ready to do business with you right now at this very moment. And
it's a great point. Some clients are ready to sign up today, and others it just takes a while. I mean, I think the longest we ever had was a 7-year gap between introductory meeting and becoming a client at one of my old firms. So when they came back in, I looked in CRM like, holy crap, we met with this guy a really long time ago. Well before I was at that firm. So yeah, it is a good point that sometimes we have these immediate, benefits, and sometimes we have kind of longer play marketing opportunities that don't generate business right away, but in the long run, they're great.
Well, I do think that having that experience kind of makes me still really appreciative of what XY Planning Network brings to the table, because essentially we can all learn from each other and people can ask questions and they don't have to go figure it out the hard way. Like if I had had the knowledge that I have now, in hindsight, I would have probably been doing a side hustle to cover all of my expenses until that moment kicked in where there was enough business for me to say, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. But I had no idea. I didn't know about side hustles. I didn't know about starting a business from scratch. I didn't know anything. I was just like, woohoo, I'm going to try this and it's going to be great.
It's a fair point that you had the technical knowledge, but no one really teaches us how to run a business. And even the nuances of like doing bookkeeping and getting an LLC in place all the way to, what is realistic in terms of timeline and what it takes to actually get the firm off the ground. So It's certainly not something they teach you even in financial planning school. So
not even in MBA school. I have my MBA.
Very true.
I learned a lot about business development marketing for Pepsi. I think that was like a bunch of our projects all were centered around Pepsi. And I'm like, well, maybe I should have done the small business MBA if there were such a thing.
If there were. So it wasn't working. What were the next steps for you?
So just to speed it up so we don't take an hour and a half talking about all of the cool different places that I worked at that point, I was really just beat down. I was like, maybe I'm not a good fit for financial planning. I mean, I'm not like a natural born salesperson. I'm not somebody who could, sell a pen, which is an exercise they make you go through, by the way.
Oh, don't you hate that exercise? Like, I actually consider myself to be like a half decent salesperson, and the thought of like somebody handing me a pen and telling me to sell them that pen just makes me want to throw it.
Exactly. Me too. Yep. So at that point, I was like, well, what am I doing with my life? I went into marketing for a little while, 2 different firms. One was a firm where it was a platform for financial planning firms. That was actually a really cool position. And then another one where I was supporting financial reps out in the field, where I got to kind of do all of like the introductory. I got to do a lot of financial education seminars. And
Very cool.
Like so I just needed a break. I felt like really beat down. I was tired of the people that I needed to be doing business with me telling me like, you look like you're 17 years old. How old are you really? Those types of things. And I was like, I just need a break. So those are really great, things to have learned from that kind of, I think, have helped me out quite a bit today. Because when you teach other people how to market and go into your own firm and you're like, hey, maybe I should take my advice.
As hard as that is sometimes.
From when I was actually training people to do this. So I went from there into a startup firm. They had a whole lot of educational material, big website, cool technology, and they were adding on a piece to do financial planning to the public. And, they were working with younger people. And I was like, this sounds fabulous. Like, this sounds absolutely great. This is exactly what I wanted to be doing, is actually doing financial planning, not having to work with people that are 65 to 80. No offense to 65 to 80-year-olds. I love you guys and gals, but
it's just not exciting work for you.
Yeah,
and that's okay.
I always knew that I wanted to be working with people that were maybe within 10 years of my age. So that was a really exciting opportunity. It was a startup firm. I'd never worked for a startup firm before. I probably, besides my company now, that was probably the hardest that I've ever worked, longest hours, but it was something that I was passionate about. So I didn't really care. I'm just like, it's so cool. I don't really care that I'm working all these hours.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll go ahead and name the company just because we'll get tons of emails if not. It was the same company that Sophia Barra, who we interviewed back in episode 3, worked for. And that's LearnVest, who I guess when you came on board was just launching their planning platform.
Yes. Yeah, there was like an initial round of a few financial planners, and then I was like the next round of financial planners that they hired before they like took off and started hiring a whole bunch of people. I think at this point, they have a lot more people working in their financial planning department than they ever had when I was there.
Fair enough. So you worked at LearnVest, worked your tail off, and then ultimately decided to launch your own firm. What was the final straw for you that going back out and launching your own RIA was the way, I guess was the direction that you wanted to go? Because you had kind of already tried this, sort of, but not really. So like what pushed you over the edge?
Well, honestly, when I left LearnVest, I didn't think I was going to start my own firm just then.
Oh, really?
Nope. The reason that I left was, I was having these, okay, I'm working 60 hours a week. My husband does engineering. And so he has a pretty challenging job too. And he was working like 60 hours a week. So we both each had like a day on the weekend that we were working. And I have a daughter. She's 5 now. So at that point, she was like 3.5 or 4. And I was just having this I was having mommy guilt. I was like, I don't want my daughter to be, not seeing either parent for like 6 days out of the week. So I actually left because I felt like I just wanted to cut back and be able to kind of be more of a mom, more of a primary parent. So when I left, I went to go work part-time with a friend of mine just because I was like, I need to take a breath. I need to figure out what I'm doing. I need to kind of piece it all together and be able to actually like spend some time with my daughter before she goes off to school. And I don't really have that option to be able to spend time with her anymore.
So now, if I remember correctly, you were doing kind of financial planning, paraplanning work for your friend. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I was kind of just helping her out with her practice, helping out with the paraplanning part of it, trying to get her caught up, and then also trying to help her out with systems because she had a CRM, but didn't really use it. She did a lot of marketing, but was losing a lot of prospects because she just didn't have a good way to follow up and she would forget about them. So I did that for a little while. And I had 2 conversations that kind of pushed me a little bit into opening up my own firm. One of them was with Sophia Vera, who I'm friends with. And she had the funniest analogy where she said something like, Katie, you are an outside cat now, which is funny. I don't even like cats. I'm a dog person. So I was like, where is this analogy going? And she said, you're an outside cat and you're trying to be an inside cat. And maybe you should just let yourself be an outside cat. And I was like,
oh, that's so good.
I was like, that is the funniest analogy. But I totally was like, that speaks to me because she's right. I do feel like I still have that entrepreneurial drive to be doing exactly, what I set out to do. But I was so just like beat down because I'm like, at that point, I think I was like 9 years into the industry. I had been in a bunch of places. At this point, my resume is probably not looking all that great. It's like, how many firms have you been at over the last how many years?
Yeah, we start to look ADD as entrepreneurs.
Exactly. So. Yeah. And people are like, I don't know. I mean, if I hire you, would you be gone in exactly 1 year? Because I'm kind of seeing a pattern here.
I really wish I could hear, if I could have been a fly on the wall for the conversation with your husband when you go, I'm an outside cat, honey.
I know.
Like, I don't know what that means. Like, yeah, I'm an outside cat, not an inside cat.
Yeah. Well, he's known me. I mean, we've known each other since we were, I think, 20 years old. So we had always talked about me starting a firm. But in my head, I had this mental hurdle where I was like, I don't want to do this until my daughter starts school. And then once she starts school, that's when I'm going to do it. So
makes sense.
I had the conversation with Sophia about the outside cat versus inside cat. And then I also had a conversation with Michael Kitzes, and he's, by the way, he's like the best listener that I've ever met in my entire life. Like,
oh, he's going to love that.
We should all learn how to listen as well as Michael does before you speak, because he's a great listener. And then he kind of thinks about it and then he talks. So I was kind of chatting with him and he's like, well, what are you wanting to do going forward? And I told him, well, I think I eventually want to start my own firm, but I'm just kind of in a holding pattern right now until I get to that point that I've set for myself whenever my daughter starts school. He was like, well, that's kind of silly. I mean, like, why don't you just start it and then you can control how many hours you're working? And I was like, why is that so obvious, but yet that did not?
But so groundbreaking when somebody else says it. Isn't it funny how that happens?
Exactly. And I was like, I hadn't really thought about that, but maybe I should look into it. And so I think this was at the point where XY Planning Network still didn't exist. It was still in the baby phases. It hadn't been birthed yet. You guys were still talking about it. And he kind of posted as if you had a bunch of resources and you had technology tools to fit into and you had like a forum and other people that were going through what you were going through, Like, do you think that would make it easier? And I was like, heck yeah, that would make it easier. Like, what is this thing that you speak of? Because I'm pretty sure I've researched everything out there and I've about what you're talking about. And he was like, well.
So welcome to the Michael Kitces mindset and the way he thinks. And this is so funny because I remember him telling me about talking to you. And he was like, yeah, so because he and I have been tossing around this idea of kind of making it easier for folks to start for a firm. And he's like, yeah, so I talked to, Katie Brewer, and this was kind of what I posed. And she said she'd be all on board. And that was one of the things that helped us kind of formulate what we were even going to be offering, because we had kind of the concept behind it, but weren't exactly sure what folks needed. So
yeah, I'll send you guys a consultant.
That's funny. No kidding.
I mean, we've kind of talked about my different experiences and learning that I knew where I wanted to be and what I wanted to be doing. But it kind of took me a little while to kind of have the confidence to actually take the leap. And so this was exactly what I needed to actually take that leap.
So you got your firm launched, and you have done, and you mentioned side hustles before, so I want to talk a little bit about that, but you've done some really cool stuff, I think, to really get your name out there and get the brand built. So just starting with marketing, tell me, I guess, let's talk through a little bit about what you've done to bring in kind of that initial wave of clients, because you've been in business a little over a year now.
Right. Yeah. So I think one of the advantages maybe that I had was that I've been in the industry for quite a while. I got involved with the Financial Planning Association probably 2 years in to being in the industry. So whenever I started my CFP courses, somebody else in my firm said, well, if you're doing your CFP, you might as well start getting involved in the Financial Planning Association. I was like, okay. In the Dallas area, we have I'm just going to brag, but we have one of the best Financial Planning Association chapters in the nation.
It is a really big chapter. I have heard that before, that it's really great.
It's a very big chapter. There are people that are really involved. The volunteerism just kind of blows my mind sometimes. And then we kind of have some bigger firms here in Dallas where they encourage their employees to go get involved in the FPA. So I think all of that really helps out. But I had known a lot of these people for 9 or 10 years now. And I've been pretty active. I mean, I've volunteered on committees. I've helped out with events. They know that I have a strong work ethic and they know me. So I think that was really good, because when I told people what I was doing, a lot of them were like, that's great. We actually run across people all the time and we have to turn them away. So we are now going to put your name in as somebody who is a potential, go check out this person. You're not a great fit for our firm, but you should go talk to Katie Brewer. So I think my first 3 clients, one of them was a referral from another financial planner. One of them found me off, and the other 2 found me off the XY Planning Network.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So you can go back. I'm trying to remember which episode it was that Michael and I did. I can't remember if it was our first bonus episode that we did recently, or if it was our niche marketing, but where we focused on, kind of developing your niche, where we talk about go talk to other planners about what you're doing, especially the ones with high minimums, because they are a phenomenal referral source of new clients, because they have all these people coming to them asking for help, and they literally have to say, I'm sorry, you're not rich enough to work with me. And I know for a fact most advisors don't want to say that. They don't want to have that conversation. They'd rather say, hey, we really specialize in a different type of client, but here's Katie Brewer. We know her. She's awesome. She works with clients just like you. And they don't have to say, because you're poor. It's more that, that's just the client demographic that you want to work with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And a lot of them will say, we're probably not a good cultural fit or a fit for what you're looking for, but you should go talk to Katie Brewer. And from the get-go, I had my website set up and ready to go. I still tell financial planners, I'm like, if you work at a traditional firm, you have a nice office in a nice area of town. You have a receptionist that's probably greeting people. That is your first impression. If you work virtually with people, your first impression is A, what do people come up with when they Google you? Because they will. And B, what does your website look like? What's the call to action on the website? And kind of what is the feeling that they're getting from your website? So I kind of decided that my website was my office at this point.
So the website's the storefront. So you speak some, right? And you do some seminars and things like that locally?
I do. Whenever I started off, I kind of figured out that I was only going to focus on 3 things. I was going to go meet with financial planners that I already knew and just explain to them what I'm doing. I wanted to start a blog and be consistent about it, which is funny because if you ask me 2 years ago, would I be writing? I'd be like, no, I'm not going to write. I hate writing. I was that person who had a research paper and would wait until the night before and then write something at 2 a.m. And it would probably be like not very good, but for some reason I still got A's on it. So I'm not bad at writing. I just don't like writing. So the blog, talking with other financial planners, and speaking. And the reason that I chose those three, I figured if people were coming to my website, there should be stuff there. It shouldn't just be fluffy and me being like, hi, I'm cool, so you should call me. There should actually be like educational things there that they can read through, that can also be a resource. Whenever I work with people, a lot of times as a background, if they don't understand like the basics of estate planning, I'll include in their financial plan a link back to an article that I wrote about the basics of estate planning. So it's convenient to me because I get to use it as marketing collateral and as client collateral all at the same time.
That's awesome. So you're basically using your blog post inside of the actual financial plan.
Right, exactly. I mean, there's no reason not to leverage stuff that you've already put together. And so I did try to kind of focus on like base articles that I could use again and again whenever I first started writing.
Very cool. So how did you get the speaking gigs? Because this is something a little different than anybody else that we've had on the show so far. So where do you find the speaking engagements and what are you talking about? I mean, just kind of give us an overview of that.
Yeah, so I knew whenever I started doing speaking stuff that I had to do a little bit of homework beforehand. So I worked with a friend of mine who is awesomely creative. We kind of exchanged services a little bit. I still act as somebody that she can bounce financial planning things off of, like more complicated financial planning situations. According to her, I'm an encyclopedia of knowledge. I don't know about that, but I do tend to...
You know how to use Google really well. That's my skill set.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I do tend to collect. I'm like a hoarder of information. So I do tend to like collect a lot of information. But she helped me to kind of brainstorm some different topics that people might be interested in. And she brought a great perspective to the table because she had done some like employee education type stuff before. So she really knew like what people would actually be interested in. So I kind of started there and I kind of did a big brainstorm, like here are 3 topics that I could present on, built out kind of just the baseline PowerPoints, just so that I would have something that I would know, like, if somebody was like, well, what is it that you're going to cover? That I wouldn't just be like, I don't know, what do you want me to cover? I wanted it to be more like, this is something that's already put together. I could bring it as an educational session to your organization. So I had to do a little bit of homework on the front end. And then essentially I went through a couple of exercises to identify who it was that I really even wanted to be in front of. And so I just started reaching out to organizations. And it's amazing because a lot of them have a speaker coordinator who's like always looking for good people to come in and give educational stuff. They don't want people that are doing sales. So I always tell them up front, I'm like, look, this is in no way intended for me to come in and sell something. I'm doing this as strictly educational. If people say that they want to sign up for my newsletter list, I will add them to my newsletter list, but I'm not going to like spam your members ever. That's just, I have to put it out there because sometimes they're like, well, if you own your own business, like we don't really want you to come in, take a picture of our sign-in list and then bug the crap out of our members.
Sure. So how are you finding, what organizations, I guess, can you give us some examples?
Yeah. So I was able to speak to a local women's professional organization in Fort Worth, and then they had a different chapter in Dallas. So that was one that I gave. And then as you start doing these, like it's kind of like working with clients, like the referrals start coming because if somebody really thinks that you did a great job, they'll come up to you afterwards and they'll be like, hey, I thought this was really helpful. I'm also a member of blah, blah, blah. You should really talk to them about giving this presentation. So I started getting those really pretty quickly where people were like, this was amazing. You need to go talk to the person at this organization and see if they'll fit you in to the calendar of guest speakers that they have coming in.
That's so great. And that's why we advocate so hard for having a really clearly defined target market, because your target market will refer you to more people in your target market. So whether it's clients or speaking engagements or new members in XYPN, ultimately our clients and the people that see us are the ones that will send people to us that are the right fit. So exactly. It's such a good point to just kind of get, once your foot's in the door, it's kind of a compounding effect.
And then I also use this sometimes as a lead-in. Like I'll go to networking things around Dallas. I try to keep it pretty focused. I either attend young professional events or I attend professional women events. But at those, it's a lot easier for me to meet somebody and to say, hey, if you're a part of any organization that ever needs a speaker, I have this, this, and this. They've been really well received. Do you think that that would be something that would be of interest? I've had people that I just met and talked to for like 2 minutes the evening before where, I kind of ask, I'd say I do speaking. Is there anybody that you know of that could be of use for? And they're like, I do actually. There's this organization. Great. You should talk to this person. Tell them that I referred you so that they know where you came from. And so I feel like that's a lot better ask for me because there's not any strings attached. Really, there's really no strings attached. Like I'm trying to go about all of this as I'm educating people with my blog posts. I'm educating people with my speaking. And then if they're interested in talking, they'll let me know. If they're interested,
they'll reach out.
Yeah, exactly. And if they're interested in signing up for my blog posts, they'll sign up. And I mean, a lot of that has come back around where people that were in a session that I gave a seminar to or a workshop to will kind of reach out a couple of months later and be like, hey, I've got this going on. Would you talk to me about it? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Let's set up a time to talk.
Now, are you charging for these speaking engagements?
I wasn't at first, but I've started charging.
Okay. Which makes sense. You get your foot in the door, people start learning your name, you start getting offers, so then you can start charging a little bit and basically turn it into a little bit of a side hustle, a little bit of a side stream of income.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll say at this point, it's not like I'm going to quit my financial planning job and just go be a professional speaker, but I love doing it and I love being able to educate people. And for certain organizations, like it makes sense to have somebody that they're paying to come in there and speak, especially conferences. Those tend to be where they've got a conference budget, regardless of, even if the organization's like, we don't have 2 dimes to run together. Usually, if they have a conference, they have a conference budget.
Absolutely. So there's nothing better than getting paid to market yourself. And while you're not up there selling your services, you are selling yourself because you're showcasing, hey, I know what I'm doing. I'm educational. I know how to take these really complex topics and turn it into something that everyone can understand. And so, you're basically getting paid to come in and market what you do. What are the topics? So you said you have 3 major topics. What were the 3 that you kind of started with?
So I started with one that was more kind of like, the title is much cooler than this, but it's like things that professional women do that are holding them back. And really just based off of experience, there are some things that I see totally that women do that are kind of shooting themselves in the foot. So I wanted to make that more like less financial planning 101 and more like, okay, we're going to talk about budgeting, but in the context of, sometimes as women, we tend to like take care of everybody else. And then we're like, oh, I guess I'm going to take care of myself now, as opposed to, trying to make sure. The way I put it is you have to put your own oxygen mask on before you can go help everybody else out with their oxygen mask. I'm like, take the advice of the pilots on the airplanes and put your own oxygen mask on.
So take care of yourself first.
Yeah. And I mean, that does not take a CFP to go give a presentation about negotiation and about taking care of yourself first and kind of like basic.
But it's a really important topic. And who else is going to talk on that other than a professional woman who maybe made some of those mistakes herself and can kind of speak to it and also has the financial planning background and expertise?
Right. Exactly. So I've got that one. I also have one that is like the things that young professionals need to know. So that one is more probably financial planning based. But when I first wrote it, I had that same friend of mine go through and kind of give me suggestions. And she was like, you have to take at least half of this stuff out. And I was like, really? And she's like, yeah, you're making this way too complicated. Like you need to dial it way back. And I was like, that is so interesting. So I did that. And then when I gave it, it was really, really well received. And I was like, really? Because at that point, I felt like I had taken it from like a financial planning 102 course down to a financial planning 101 course. And I was like, people aren't interested in this. But I got feedback where people were like, there were, some people that weren't even like young professionals. And they were like, this is great stuff. And even though I've kind of mastered these concepts, it's really good to have the reminder that there are basics of financial planning that you have to make sure that you're focusing on or the rest of it's not going to work. And I'm like, wow, really?
Well, in keeping in mind, we don't exactly go, watch financial planning presentations very often, unless you're a financial advisor and show up to conferences. And so, this may be the first time some of those folks have had any of that information or education. So, anytime we're giving consumer facing presentations, we have to pull it way, way back because I think we overestimate what consumers actually know.
Exactly. And then I always get great questions afterwards. By that time, people feel like they can kind of open up a little bit. That's why I like to go speak to organizations where they already have people that are attending, as opposed to me trying to put together like a dinner seminar. Because I feel like it's just a different environment. If people already know each other, they're going to be a lot more likely to like open up, ask questions, kind of discuss amongst themselves, share stuff between themselves. So I get some really, really great questions as part of those speaking engagements. And honestly, they help me to write other blog articles that address those things. And then it kind of allows everybody that's attending to get even more in-depth conversation around different topics.
Absolutely. So what is the third topic?
I've been doing some kind of millennial focused stuff. It's also not really financial planning related. And that came about just because I had so many people that it's so funny. It's like people think millennials are like this like different, like they live on a different planet or something.
Sometimes we talk about us like we do, but definitely not the case.
Yeah. And what's funny is I'm actually like an in-betweener. I was born in 1980. So it depends on
That's the cutoff
study.
year.
Yeah, which study that you look at. Like some people say millennials started in 82. Some people say they started in 80. Some people say 79. But I also feel like that gives me a different perspective because I can almost act as like the translator between the two. You know, I'm like, I'm probably half Gen X and half millennial in my thinking and in my kind of entrepreneurial spirit. But that also allows me to go in and be able to talk to people that might be business owners where they're like, oh my God, these millennials, like I don't know what to do with them. And be able to actually give good, actionable, like, okay, how are you vetting people? Like, are you giving stuff to them beforehand? And so it's almost funny because it's like, that's not financial planning related at all, but it's helping people and it's still getting my name out there. And then a lot of those people might, you know, be like, okay, so also you do financial planning. I've been meaning to talk to somebody about that because
tell us more about what you do.
Right, exactly. Like I'm concerned about retirement. I've never worked with somebody, or I feel like the person I use just like sells me a bunch of junk. And I'm like, all right, let's get together and talk.
So we are running up on our time. Real quick before we wrap up, though, I just want to hit on the highlights of your side hustles, because I know that's an area that you've been really focused on. You mentioned earlier that was probably the mistake you made whenever you were launching or kind of trying to get started the first time around. So you've mentioned working with another financial planner, doing some paraplanning work. You've mentioned speaking. Any other side hustles or side income streams that you've had coming in since you launched your firm?
Yeah. So for a little while, I did editing on financial planning articles. I had already done that before and I really loved it. Like somebody else was writing it and then I was kind of going through it and making sure that it actually made sense from a financial planner's perspective. So kind of acting as like a resident expert and an editor. So I also did that for a while I was building up. And then I have done some writing for different places where I've gotten paid for the blog post, which is really convenient. I mean, I'm very fortunate in that I'm married and we redid the heck out of our budget before I launched this. So, we pretty much said, okay, we're scraping everything out. We cut cable. I probably cried for a week because I don't get HGTV anymore.
Which is probably good because that just causes me to spend money when I'm like, oh, look at all this cool stuff.
Exactly. But we cut a whole bunch of stuff back so that we could make sure that we had the personal cash flow covered. So all of my side hustles have been so that I can put more money into the business and so that I can cover my business expenses and not feel like I have to have a freak out moment where I'm just like, oh my God, this isn't working. I have to go. I'm making money, because I had that experience before and it was awful. And, if I had probably stuck with it, I might, already have a multi-million-dollar AUM firm. But, at the end of the day, that didn't work out. And so I can either sit there and pout about it, or I can go, all right, what can I learn off of that I could be doing differently this time?
And I would say it's a really common theme among everyone that we've had on the show that has started their own firm. And that is, you've got to get your personal financial house in order. Ultimately, you've got to manage the personal expenses. Otherwise, this whole thing just doesn't work.
I always joke that I gave a presentation to my board of directors about my budget and my expenses. And my board of directors was actually just my husband.
And as an engineer, he is not the guy I'd want to actually be laying a budget out for. So,
I did all kinds of spreadsheets for him. He was excited. But I mean, I wanted to make sure he was on board because I knew this was going to be hard. And, I wanted to make sure that he knew, like I go to networking events sometimes that are at night because apparently young professionals can only meet from 5 to 7 and drink alcohol.
It's true. It's the only place they have to go. So
it's the only way to network. So, I wanted to make sure beforehand that he was on board with, as a family, like what we were going to need to be doing to make sure that this kind of launches. And he's kind of my biggest cheerleader. So it's really great that we had that before, that he had the buy-in for me to be able to launch my own firm. But I always try to keep him updated too. I have my quarterly board of directors presentation on how.
I think that's awesome. Like, we're kind of joking about it, but I think that's huge, because having your partner's support is critical. Because if you have a partner that is not on board with the idea, I would venture to say you will not be successful, because even if your partner is not involved in the day-to-day, they have to be okay with the random evening meetings and the weekends away and the conferences and the speaking engagements and the tight budget. I mean, there's just a lot that goes on. So if you're looking at launching a firm and you have a partner, have a significant other that's very involved in your life, you got to get them on board, and that's just part of it. So, Katie, well, I'll ask you the question that we ask all of our guests at the end of each episode, and that is, if you could go back, and I don't even know where to take you back, probably early career Katie Brewer, as you're kind of evaluating this career financial planning, in the back of your mind, you have this dream of doing comprehensive planning, maybe owning your own firm one day. If there's one thing that you could go back and tell yourself, just one thing that you wish you had known then, what do you think that thing would be?
That is a great question. And I should probably be a lot more prepared to this. Well, honestly, I kind of think that even though I really was struggling through a lot of these different career paths, I feel like a lot of them brought a lot of value for what I eventually wanted to do. So I know I hear a lot of times people that want to get into this industry, or maybe even people that are already in this industry, wanting to quit. Like, they don't want to be in the industry anymore because they're like, this is not what I wanted to be doing anymore. And so I would say I was really close. I was very, very close to just being like, I'm just not a fit for this industry. I mean, I would say I probably would have tried to figure out a little bit earlier if there was a way to get into financial planning without having to go knock on random people's doors in random neighborhoods.
Makes sense.
But at the same time, like, that forced me to be really, really uncomfortable. And that makes me a lot better probably now at being like, I don't have control over what people do or say or how they act. Like, I can only control my actions.
Yeah, it was still valuable learning experience, but it still might have been nice to have a peek at the future so that each step was a little bit easier to get through.
Exactly.
Well, Katie, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. I know listeners are going to love this episode because you have such a varied but really interesting background that I think a lot of folks will connect with. So thank you again for taking the time to be on.
Yeah, thanks, Alan.
I really enjoy this interview because I want people to know that it's okay to keep trying until you find the place in this career. I mean, there's just so many different ways to be successful, and you just have to find the way that's going to work for you. I think a lot of folks would judge Katie's resume, honestly, because she bounced around and didn't stay in jobs for years and years on end. But I commend her that once she knew something wasn't a good fit or a firm wasn't a good fit, she moved on until ultimately she found her calling in starting her own firm. So for anyone out there who's struggling to find their place, just keep looking. Many of us have been there. Many of us, experienced that place several times in our career. So just keep looking and know that if you just keep taking one more step forward, step after step, eventually you're going to find your place. Now, remember, you can find all of the show notes as well as additional resources mentioned in this episode at XYPlanningNetwork.com/19. Now, this month's episodes were brought to you by TD Ameritrade Institutional, which provides comprehensive brokerage and custody services to more than 4,000 fee-based, independent registered investment advisors. Their advanced technology platform, coupled with personal support from their dedicated service teams, allows investment advisors to grow and manage their practices more efficiently and effectively while optimizing time with clients. They provide a robust offering of products, programs, and services designed to help advisors build their businesses and do the best possible job they can to help their clients with their financial goals. Now, remember, you can learn more about what TD Ameritrade is working on at XYPlanningNetwork.com/23. Thanks again for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to XYPlanningNetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.